I hadn't realized that. Now, please, join me.
Yes, I can see why Mr. Jefferson's party would frown upon some of your activities, but I do believe you have set an example as to what is expected of the presidential wives to follow. For example, your formal dinners on Thursday evenings and your drawing room gatherings on Friday evenings. But I do...
Yes, dear, you have been holding your tongue for the most part for the past 8 years, but what?
Well, I would like... Oh, no, I do appreciate your guidelines. Everyone does. And I do want to learn what is expected of me as a wife of the president. You are the first, and your experiences will help me establish what I am to do. Tomorrow is the day it all begins for John and me.
Well, it is very flattering for me, my dear, to be asked the rules by which you say I have gained the opinion you say is said of me.
Why, thank you.
The practice with me has been thus, always to receive the first visits and then return them. The diplomatic wives are always introduced to me by the Secretary of State. And as for the tradespeople of the town, they seem to me to be little better than the domestics. They were not listening to me.
Well, it sounds more like a pedantic lecture than a cordial bit of advice. And I really do think
yes, dear, you've been waiting 8 years. Go ahead.
The idea that the wife of the president shall not discuss political issues, shall not take a stand, shall not get involved. If we mean to have heroes, statesmen, and philosophers, we need to have it. Learned women who refrain from timidity and who
they are not suitable for this. Their knowledge is better suited.
Well, knowledge is a fine thing, and Mother Eve thought so. But she was smarted so severely for hers that most of her daughters have been afraid ever since. Lady Washington.
Hi, that lovely salutation. I am aware of that, as I am of the title Mrs. President and Lady Presidentress. Mrs. President is a title that sounds of power and co-leadership, which this position definitely does not hold, and the title Lady Presidentress is absurd. No, Lady Washington is the one used in the
much louder.
Okay. Lady Washington is the one that is used most often, and the one that I prefer. Though it too is decried by the anti-federalist, the Democrats, who say that it smacks of George Washington wanting to be thought of as George I, the King of America.
Oh, I never thought that.
That, I assure you, has never been his desire. In fact, he didn't even want to run for a second term, and absolutely refused to run for a third term, figuring that 2 terms for a president was sufficient. As for me being called Lady Washington, we will have to decide what you and the others that follow will be called. But it matters not. I have led a very dull life here. I feel more like a state prisoner than anything else. But I will soon be out of this prison and back home in Mount Vernon. But you were interested in the role of the president's wife as advisor and possibly standard bearer?
Oh, yes. I wrote to John during his stay here in Philadelphia that he must remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than his ancestors had been. And I insisted that he not put such unlimited power in the hands of husbands, and reminded him that all men would be tyrants if they could. I feel it is my duty to stand up for the ladies and to be an example of how a president's wife works at her husband's side and not at his heel.
I see. Sit down, Abigail, and look at me. I am the president's side. I encourage him, I extol his virtues, I celebrate his triumphs, and I soothe his brow. I know what it is to be a wife. I have been married over 45 years. Did you know that I was married twice and that I was widowed at 26?
Oh, yes, I knew that. Most of the ladies whose husbands are part of the government know something of your background, though not all the details, which I'm sure you will tell me.
Well, I was attractive when I was younger, but it did seem that as not a member of one of the wealthiest families in Virginia, that I was not destined to marry well. I was the eldest of 8 children, and my father, although he owned 500 acres and 15 to 20 slaves, was not among the elite of Virginia.
opportunity of my life to take part with me in the Oh, I'm sorry, Lady Washington. I interrupted your story.
Yes, you are in the habit of that. Now, where was I? Oh, yes, Daniel. Daniel Park Custis. Daniel was 20 years my senior and interested in me for, well, let's not say for my money, of which there was none. I seem to have captured Daniel's fancy. It was Daniel's father that I had concerns about. So I took matters into my own hands, and eventually my future father-in-law, deemed that I was beautiful and sweet-tempered, and gave his consent. We were married in 1750. I was 18 and Daniel was 38. He had waited until he had found a woman that his father that his father approved of, thus by securing his financial future and that of the children and that of myself.
It bothers me that the revolutionary leaders conceive of marriage in such a traditional way, less as the coming together of two like minds, and more as a means of property acquisition and social advancement. You all tend to think of matrimony as a manner of building alliances and consolidating or establishing your position in society. Well, John and I would never.
Yes, John and you. I love Daniel and I love the president, but the practicalities are the practicalities. Without the fortune that I acquired in my first marriage, the president might not have risen to social, political, and military power, nor been victorious. And without that victory, we would not be sitting here at tea today. I mean, there certainly would not be the tomorrow of which we speak.
Yes, but the ladies need to be a part of the tomorrow.